Good morning and welcome. It's Monday the 6th of July. It's a bright and sunny Northumbrian morning at the moment. And today we're returning to our cycle of readings from the Gospel and the Old Testament. There are three things I want to say quickly today. Firstly, we have two saints today, St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher. Many people know about Thomas More because of the film A Man for All Seasons, which immortalised his life. But he and Fisher were both loyal and faithful Catholics at the time of Henry VIII. And although More particularly was a great friend of the king and a great supporter of King Henry VIII, he also could not reconcile his conscience with the king's actions in separating from the church in Rome and in the divorce from Catherine and his marrying of Anne Boleyn. And he paid the ultimate price for that, as did St. John Fisher. So we remember them as people who were faithful, but not perfect. Faithful who persisted, even in the face of great threat and indeed the danger of their lives, to stay faithful to what they believed. And it's also important to recognise that during that Reformation period in Europe and in England, there were many people on both sides who died for what they believed. And there were many injustices committed by those in power. And when we as a church campaign for justice, for fairness, then we have to remember that we're not always perfect. And there is much in our history and much still in our common life that is not good when it's exposed to the light of Christ's love. So we should go forward with penitence and an understanding of the mess we sometimes make of things. Number two, very quickly, the Old Testament prophet is changing. We've had Amos, and Amos was a sort of a bit of a toughie. And we go to the other side, a contemporary poet, a contemporary prophet, Hosea. Amos emphasized the anger and the justice of God, and Hosea emphasizes the compassion and forgiveness of God. We hold those two prophets together always, but it's interesting to see this very different view. And thirdly, our gospel today. Our gospel today contains one of those marvellous stories. We've got St. Matthew's version, there is a version in Mark and Luke, and they are fuller. But it's the woman who reached out to touch the fringe of Jesus' cloak in order to find healing. It's sandwiched into the story of Jairus' daughter and her resurrection, really, her healing from death. But it's a very powerful story. This woman who, because of her illness, because of this issue of blood, this hemorrhage, would have been separated from the whole of society, regarded as unclean, for a dozen years, has enough faith and courage to reach out and touch Jesus, to touch his garment. And she finds healing and wholeness, but above all, she finds restoration. Because her issue of blood is healed, she can take her place in the community again. This is important. Jesus doesn't want anyone to be cast out by their actions, by their condition, by their illness. Jesus wants us to include. He wants to reach out to the poor, the sick, the lonely, and say, you are God's children. And he wants the church to welcome them so that they may find wholeness and restoration in his body, which is the church. Let us pray that in our lives, in our actions, we can share that same passion that Jesus had to bring people back to him. May God bless us today and always.